So one thing that may or may not be clear is that when you have an if statement, an else if statement, or an else statement, if there is only one thing to do, you technically do not need the squiggly braces. My advice to you is never do this. Never omit the squiggly braces. And the reason for that is if you just get in the habit of using squiggly braces, you know it will always work. If you have a statement like this, and then you have to go back in and add another, like something else to do, and you forget to put in the squiggly braces, you'll have a really, really, really hard time finding that bug. I can give you examples if you want, but just don't do it is my advice. If you're dashing off a quick if statement and want to put in want to do it without braces, that's fine. It'll work. But again, my years of programming experience would advise you to just put in the brackets or the braces. Your life will be a lot easier. So another thing that the way Java works is it doesn't actually care about white space. So you can, here, let me do this. Start a REPL. So you can do this. You can put things wherever you want in Java. You can do this, and it will still run. Java essentially ignores spaces and tabs. However, right, if I were to be a bad programmer and have stuff like this, it would make it really, really difficult to come back and figure out what's going on. So what we do by convention in Java and C and C++ and C# and all these other things, and what we do by necessity in Python, if you ever take one of my Python courses, Python cares about spacing. Python will not let you do this. But in Java and these other languages, what we do is we have a convention which says if you're starting a new block, indent by one level, right? So that everything that's in the same block has the same indent level. So all three of these right here, you know immediately, visually, that they're part of this same block. Because this one's not over here, and this one's not over here. And you can imagine if you had thousands of lines of code, you'd have a really hard time figuring out what's what. So by convention, we add a little tab over for every time we start a new block. And what I mean by block is whatever is inside your if statement, all right? If 3 is less than 4, right? I tab it over to show that this part right here is part of the if statement, while these two are not. So I don't have to, like I said, I could just put it like that and it would still work, but visually it just makes it a lot easier to read the code and figure out what's what if you tab over like that. So with that in mind, what 3.3 is trying to tell you is that every time you have nested if statements, right, you want to tab over one more time. So, right, if 3 is greater than 4, and if, I don't know, false equals true, whatever, it doesn't really matter, right? You see how it automatically tabbed over for me. Because it knows that this block right here, all right, fine, I'll just make it true is true. It stops. Yeah, fine. 10 is less than 5. There. It's still going to complain. Okay, anyway, the point being, it's tabbing over so that if I have an else statement here, you can immediately visually see that this else statement, by following this line up here, belongs to this if statement. Again, it doesn't matter if I tabbed it over, it would still belong to the same if statement. It would just look like it's with the other if statement. So the point I'm trying to get across is by using tabs and spaces in a smart way, you can make your own life easier about which if and else goes together and things like that. So if 3 is less than 4, print hello world. If 10 is less than 5, print the universe is wrong. Else, okay, so which if statement does this go to? It goes to the first one because this matches this brace matches this brace, but also visually we can see that it matches that. So if I said if 1 is less than 5, it'll do that. And if I said 30 is less than 4, it's never going to get into this one because this one, as you can see visually, is part of that if statement. So it's only doing these bottom ones. It never gets into this one because it never got into this one. So it never went down here. It skipped all the way down to this else statement.
Could you write out like if the second if had an else statement as well?
Yeah. So Replit is coloring all these things green because it's warning me that it's never going to get here because it's dead code. It's smart enough to know that 30 will never be less than 4. I could make this better. Int x equals 30, int y equals 1. So let's put x here, and it'll stop bugging me so much. So now you can see this else this second else statement belongs to this if statement because all of these line up. Right? Again, Java wouldn't care if I did this. It's going to work exactly the same way. It just looks terrible and it's really hard to figure out what's going on. So Good programming practice says line up all the statements that go together. And in fact, if you have a big chunk of code, what I would do at the end here, I would say, and if y is less than 5, just so I know where I'm at. Right? If there were 100 lines of code here and I couldn't see them all on the screen at the same time, like I usually put here end class main and public static void main, right? Because I don't remember where these belong, those little squiggly braces, because I can't see high enough. There's too many lines of code there. But by putting those comments in there when I first made my class, then it just helps me remember. So that's a really good programming tip when you start creating your own methods in your own classes, to just put in a little comment at the end, and then you'll remember how many braces you have.
Yeah, thanks. That makes a lot more sense now.
Awesome.